Vaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Chapter 7. The son of Drona punished. Text 1. Shaunaka Vacha Nirgate Narade Sota Bhagavan Badarayana Shutavamstad Abhipretam Tata Kem Akarod Vibhu.
Rishi Saunaka asked, O Sutta, the great and transcendently powerful Vyasadeva heard everything from Sri Narad Muni. So after Narad's departure, what did Vyasadeva do?
Text 2. Sutta Vacha Brahmanadyam Saraswatyam Ashrama Paschimetate Shamya Prasaiti Prokta Vishinam Sattavardhana.
Sri Sutta said, on the western bank of the river Saraswati, which is intimately related with the Vedas, there is a cottage for meditation at Samya Prasa, which enlivens the transcendental activities of the sages.
Text 3. Tasmin Swashame Vyaso Vadari Sandamandite Asino Paupasprisha Pranidadhyamana Swayam.
In that place, Srila Vyasadeva, in his own ashram, which was surrounded by berry trees, sat down to meditate after touching water for purification.
Text 4. Bhakti Yogena Manasi Samyak Pranite Male Apashyat Purusham Purnam Mayam Chatadapashrayam.
Thus, he fixed his mind, perfectly engaging it by linking it in devotional service, bhakti yoga, without any tinge of materialism, and thus he saw the absolute personality of Godhead, along with his external energy, which was under full control.
Text 5. Yaya samohito jiva atmanam trigunatmakam paropi manute nartham tatkritam cha vipadyate.
Due to this external energy, the living entity, although transcendental to the three modes of material nature, thinks of himself as a material product and thus undergoes the reactions of material miseries.
Text 6. Anarthopashamam sakshad bhakti yogam adhokshaje lokasya janato vidvams chakri sattvata samhitam.
The material miseries of the living entity, which are superfluous to him, can be directly mitigated by the linking process of devotional service, but the mass of people do not know this, and therefore the learned Vyasadeva compiled this Vedic literature, which is in relation to the supreme truth.
Text 7. Yasyam Vaishruyamanayam Krishna Parama Purushe Bhaktirutpadyate Pumsa Bhayapaha.
Simply by giving oral reception to this Vedic literature, feeling for loving devotional service to Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead sprouts up at once to extinguish the fire of lamentation, illusion, and fearfulness.
Text 8. Sa samitam bhagavatem kritvanukramya chatram shukavadhana paramasa nivriti niratam muni.
The great sage Vyasadeva, after compiling the Srimad Bhagavatam and revising it, taught it to his own son, Sri Shukadeva Goswami, who was already engaged in self-realization.
Text 9. Shaunaka Vacha Savinivriti Nirata Sarvatropekshako Muni Kasyava Bratimetam Atmarama Samabhyasat.
Sri Saunaka asked Sutta Goswami, Sri Shukadeva Goswami was already on the path of self-realization, and thus he was pleased with his own self. Why did he take the trouble to undergo the study of such a vast literature?
Text. Sutta vacha atmaramascha munayo nirgrantha api urukrame kurvanti ahetukim bhaktim itham bhuta gano hari.
Suta Goswami said, all different varieties of Atma Ramas, those who take pleasure in the Atma or spirit self, especially those established on the path of self-realization, though freed from all kinds of material bondage, desire to render unalloyed devotional service unto the personality of Godhead. This means that the Lord possesses transcendental qualities and therefore can attract anyone, including liberated souls. Girish Prabhu, your mic is open. If you could mute, please.
Text 11. Harir gunakshipta mater Bhagavan Badarayani Adhyagyan Mahadakhyanam Nityam Vishnu Jana Priya.
Have we lost Prabhuji? Yogesh Prabhu? Or maybe he's muted.
Okay, back to you now. I think we all got muted.
Let me unmute him, Prabhuji.
Okay, text 11. Okay, Srila Shukadeva Goswami, son of Srila Vyasadev, was not only transcendently powerful, he was also very dear to the devotees of the Lord. Thus, he underwent the study of this great narration, Srimad Bhagavatam.
Text 12. Parikshito tha rajar se janma karma vilapanam samstham cha panduputranam Bakshi Krishna kathodayam.
Sut Goswami thus addressed the rishis headed by Saunaka. Now I shall begin the transcendental narration of the Lord Sri Krishna and the topics of the birth, activities, and deliverance of King Parikshit, the sage amongst kings, as well as topics of the renunciation of the worldly order by the sons of Pandu.
Text 13 to 14. Yadamrade Kaurava Sanjayanam Vireshvatho Viragatim Gatishu Vrikodara Vidya Kadabhimarsa Bhagnarodandidhitrashtraputre Bhartapriyam Dronariti Smapasyan Krishna Sutanam Swapatam Siramsi Upaharad Vipriya Evatasya Jugupsitam Karma Vigarhayanti.
When the respective warriors of both camps, namely the Kauravas and the Pandavas, were killed on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, and the dead warriors obtained their deserved destinations, and when the son of Dhritarashtra fell down lamenting, his spine broken, being beaten by the club of Bhimsen, the son of Dronacharya, Aswasthama, beheaded the 5 sleeping sons of Draupadi and delivered the heads of a prize as a prize to his master, foolishly thinking that he would be pleased. Duryodhan, however, disapproved of the heinous act, and he was not pleased in the least.
Text 15. Mata Shishunam Nidhanam Sutanam Nishamya Goram प्यामना तदारुताद्बाष्पकलाकुलाक्षी तं सान्त्वयान् आहाकिरीतमाली.
Draupadi, the mother of 5 children of the Pandavas, after hearing of the massacre of her sons, began to cry in distress with eyes full of tears, trying to pacify her in great loss. Arjun spoke to her thus.
Text 16. Tada shuchaste pramrjami badre yad brahma bandhu shira atatayaniya gandiva mukti vishikir upare tvagramya yat snashasi dagda putra.
O gentle lady, when I present you with the head of that Brahmana, after beheading him with arrows from my Gandhi bow, I shall then wipe the tears from your eyes and pacify you. Thus, after burning your sons' bodies, you can take your bath standing on his head.
Text 17. Iti priyam valgu vichitra dalpe sa sandvayitva chitya mitra suta anvadravadamshita ugradhanva kapidvajo guruputram rathena.
Arjun, who is guided by the infallible Lord as friend and driver, thus satisfied the dear lady by such statements. Then he dressed in armor and armed himself with furious weapons, and getting into his chariot, he set out to follow Aswasthama, the son of his martial teacher.
Text 18. Tam apatantam savilakshya durat kumara hudvignam munarathena paradravat prana paripshurvyam yavad gamam rudya bhayad yathaka.
Aswasthama, the murderer of the princess, seeing from a great distance Arjun coming at him with great speed, fled in his chariot, panic-stricken, just to save his life, as Brahma fled in fear from Shiva.
Text 19. Yada sharanam atmanam ekshata shantavajinam astram brahma shiromene atmatranam tvijatmaja.
When the son of Brahmana, Aswasthama, saw that his horses were tired, he considered that there was no alternative for protection outside of his using the ultimate weapon, the Brahmastra, nuclear weapon.
Text 20. Atopashprasya salilam sandadhe tatsamahita ajanan api samharam pranakricha upastithe.
Since his life was in danger, he touched water in sanctity and concentrated upon the chanting of the hymns for throwing nuclear weapons, although he did not know how to withdraw such weapons.
Sorry, how many are we reading? I'm confused.
Up to chapter 19, Prabhuji.
Up to text 19.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank
we
you.
read. Yeah, I think we read. Thank you so much. Read up until 20. That's fine.
Hare
That's
Krishna.
okay. Thank you so much, Ishita. It was such a nice recitation. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna.
Great, Prabhu. Thank you so much. Very nice. I will share my screen once again. And then we can discuss the verse for the day. Okay, so we are discussing Canto 1, Chapter 7, entitled Son of Drona Punished, verse number 5. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet Nashta Prayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nashtaki. Verse 5. Yaya sammohito jiva atmanam trigunaatmakam paropi manute nartham tatkritam chavipadyate. Yaya sammohito jiva atmanam trigunaatmakam paropi manute nartham tatkritam chavipadyate. Yaya sammihto jiva atmanam trigunaatmakam paropi manute nartham tatkritam chabhipadyate. Synonyms. Yaya, by whom, sammohitaha, illusioned, jivaha, the living entities, atmanam, self, triguna atmakam, conditioned by the three modes of nature or a product of matter. Paraha, transcendental. Api, in spite of. Manute, takes it for granted. Anartham, things not wanted. Tat, by that. Kritamcha, reaction. Abhipadyate, undergoes thereof. Translation. Due to this external energy, the living entity, although transcendental, excuse me. Due to this external energy, the living entity, although transcendental to the three modes of material nature, thinks of himself as a material product and thus undergoes the reactions of material miseries. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Okay, maybe someone would like to read the purport. We can have 3 paras.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, can I read?
Yes, Mataji, please.
Hare Krishna. So, purport, the root cause of suffering by the materialistic living beings is pointed out with remedial measures which are to be undertaken and also the ultimate perfection to be gained. All this is mentioned in this particular verse. The living being is by constitution transcendental to material engagement, but is now imprisoned by the external energy, and therefore he thinks himself one of the material products. And due to this unholy contact, the pure spiritual entity suffers material miseries under the modes of material nature. The living entity misunderstands himself to be a material product. Thus, this means that the present perverted way of thinking, feeling, and willing under material conditions is not natural for him, but he has his normal way of thinking, feeling, and willing. The living being in his original state is not without thinking, willing, and feeling power. It is also confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita that the actual knowledge of the conditioned soul is now covered by any science. Thus, the theory that a living being is absolute, impersonal Brahman is refuted herein. This cannot be because the living entity has his own way of thinking in his original unconditional state also. The present conditional state is due to the influence of external energy, which means that the illusory energy takes the initiative while the Supreme Lord is aloof. The Lord does not desire that a living being be illusioned by external energy. The external energy is aware of this fact, but still she accepts a thankless task of keeping the forgotten soul under illusion by her bewildering influence. The Lord does not interfere with the task of the illusory energy because such performances of the illusory energy are also necessary for the formation of the conditioned soul. An affectionate father does not like then like his children to be chastised by another agent. Yet he put his disobedient children under the custody of a severe man just to bring them to order. But the all affectionate Almighty Father at the same time desires relief for the conditioned soul, relief from the clutches of the illusory energy. The king put the disobedient citizen within the wall of the jail, but sometimes the king, desiring the prisoner's relief, personally goes there and pleads for reformation. And on his doing so, energy and personal and his doing so, the prisoners are set free. Similarly, the Supreme Lord descends from his kingdom upon the kingdom of the illusionary energy and personally gives relief in the form of the Bhagavad Gita, wherein he personally suggests that although the ways of the illusory energy are very stiff to overcome, one who surrenders unto the lotus feet of the Lord is set free by the order of the Supreme. This surrendering process is a remedial measure for getting relief from the bewildering waves of the illusory energy. The sufferings process is completed by the influence of association. The Lord has suggested, therefore, that by the influence of the speeches of saintly person who has actually realized the Supreme, conditioned souls are engaged in his transcendental loving service. They get a taste for hearing about the Lord, and by such hearing, only are they gradually elevated to the platform of respect, devotion, and attachment for the Lord. The whole thing is completed by the surrendering process. Herein also the same suggestion is made by the Lord in his incarnation of Vyasadeva. This means that the conditioned souls are being reclaimed by the Lord both ways, namely by the process of punishment, by the external energy of the Lord, and by himself as a spiritual master within and without. Within the heart of every living being, the Lord himself as a super soul, Paramatma, becomes a spiritual master. And from without, he becomes a spiritual master in the shape of scriptures, saints, and initiator spiritual master. This is still more explicitly explained in the next sloka.
Thank you, Mataji.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Can I read, Prabhuji?
Yes, Mataji.
Yeah. Personal superintendence of the illusory energy is confirmed in the Vedas, the Kena Upanishad, in relation to the demigod's controlling power. Herein also, it is clearly stated that the living entity is controlled by the external energy in a personal capacity. The living being, thus subject to the control of the external energy, is differently situated. It is clear, however, from the present statement of the Bhagavatam, that the same external energy is situated in the inferior position before the personality of Godhead or the perfect being. A perfect being or the Lord cannot be approached even by the illusory energy, who can only work on the living entities. Therefore, it is sheer imagination that the Supreme Lord is illusioned by the illusory energy and thus becomes a living being. If the living being and the Lord were in the same category, then it would have been quite possible for Vyasadeva to see it, and there would have been no question of material distress on the part of the illusioned being, for the Supreme Being is fully cognizant. So there are so many material distresses on the part of the delusioned being for the Supreme, So there are so many unscrupulous imaginations on the part of the monist to endeavor to put both the Lord and the living being in the same category. Had the Lord and the living being been the same, then Srila Sukdev Goswami would not have taken the trouble to describe the transcendental pastimes of the Lord, or there would be all manifestations of illusory energy. Hare Krishna.
Can I read it, Prabhuji?
Yes.
Srimad Bhagavatam is the Samambanam remedy for suffering humanity in the clutches of Maya. Srila Vyasadeva, therefore, first of all, diagnosed the actual disease of the conditioned souls, that is, their being illusioned by the external energy. He also saw the perfect Supreme Being, from whom illusory energy is far removed, though he saw both the disease condition souls and also the cause of the disease, and the remedial measures are suggested in the next verse. Both of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living being are undoubtedly qualitatively one, but the Lord is the controller of the illusory energy, whereas the living entity is controlled by the illusory energy. Thus, the Lord and the living beings are simultaneously one and different. Another point is distinct herein, that eternal relation between the Lord and the living being is transcendental. Otherwise, the Lord would not have taken the trouble to reclaim the conditioned souls from the from the clutches of Maya. In the same way, the living entity is also required to revive his natural love and affection for the Lord, and that is the highest perfection of the living entity. Srimad Bhagavatam treats the conditioned souls with an aim to that goal of life. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much. It's a nice, very important verse, and the whole of philosophy is in here. Prabhupada is crunched. So we'll try to cover as much as we can. We'll chant Mangalacharan prayers first. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamsha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschata Desha Tarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Adigaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Nakam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langaite Girim Yatripatamaham Vande Shri Guru Dev. I was conscious of time today. It's 7:45. It's auspicious day of Ekadashi this evening. So it's very even more auspicious to read Srimad Bhagavatam on this most auspicious day. And also it's also days for three important personalities within our Sampradaya. Their appearance, disappearance day, Raghunath Das Goswami, Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, and Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. Disappearance days, I think. We will discuss the purport once again. I will try to read and I will try to expand on some of the points. Prabhupada has made many beautiful points worth reading again and again. So we are here on the verse number 5, which is Yaya Sammohito Jiva Atmanam Trigunatmakam. Yaya, by whom? So in the previous verse, it was said, Bhakti Yogena Manasi Samyak Pranihite Amale Apashyat Purusham Purnam Maya Cha Tad Apashrayam. Thus he fixed his mind, perfectly engaging it by linking it in devotional service, Bhakti Yoga, without any tinge of materialism, and thus he saw the absolute personality of Godhead along with his external energy, which was under full control. That Yaya refers to his external energy. Say Yaya Sammohito Jiva. By whom? By by the external energy. Yeah. Due to this external energy, the living entity, although transcendental to the three modes of material nature, Atmanam Trigunatmakam, Paropi Manute Anartham, even though Paro, even though Paro transcendental, Api in spite of Manute, Mantaye, Manute understands, takes for granted. Anartham, things not wanted. Tatkritam Javipadyate, undergoes thereafter reactions. So thinks of himself as the material product and thus undergoes the reactions of material materials. This is our story. So this is what we are troubled into, because we understand ourselves as product of this material nature, a material product. And then as soon as we recognize ourselves as material product, we are immediately influenced by the three modes of material nature. So in the first sentence, Prabhupada has put in the principle that are laid down by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu about how we should understand any scriptures in terms of three aspects: Sambandha, Abhidheya, Prayojan. Sambandha, relationship. The root cause of suffering by the materialistic living being is pointed out with the remedial measures which are to be undertaken, and also the ultimate perfection to be gained. All this is mentioned in this verse. So Vyasadeva is meditating, he's seeing, so the purpose of his meditation is what? To write Srimad Bhagavatam. And why is he writing Srimad Bhagavatam? He's instructed by his spiritual master, Srila Narada Muni. So Vyasadeva had although compiled all the Vedic literatures, Mahabharata, he's still not given the topmost nectar, which is Srimad Bhagavatam, which can immediately drive away the threefold miseries of the material existence. So these three aspects of Sambandha, the root cause of suffering by the materialistic living being, is pointed out with remedial measures. First of all, the root cause of suffering is because the relationship, the Sambandha, is forgotten. The moment the living entity remembers the relationship with the Supreme Lord, his miseries are finished. Then he starts to do what? With remedial measures which are to be undertaken. So he starts to act in that relationship, as a be there, and also the ultimate perfection to be gained. So that is the prayojan. So this is the key sentence. Prabhupada starts with the purpose. All this is mentioned in this particular verse, because Vyasadeva is seeing the living entities future, and he is seeing the Lord, and he's seeing the Maya Devi behind the Lord in full control. That's for the previous verse. So what is the problem? The living being is by constitution transcendental to material engagement. So Prabhupada defined this, Scripture defined this as engagement. So we are encaged, we are in a cage, we are bound. Yeah, even though transcendental, constitution transcendental to material engagement, but he is not imprisoned by, but he is now imprisoned by the external energy. So we are in the prison. In the prison house, what happens in the prison house? Why are people prisoned? Because they commit some unlawful activities for what they need to be treated. So, but he's now imprisoned by external energy, and therefore he thinks himself one of the material products. So how is the imprisonment happening here? The living entity is put into illusion that he is not the soul, he is the body. And as soon as he's in that illusion, he starts recognizing himself with the body, and with the body, he starts himself, which is the body, same as the material product, and then the suffering starts. Stays then in the prison. So until the time he realizes his true identity, he stays in the prison, acts in that identity, he stays in the prison. Now what happens then? Due to this unholy contact, the pure spiritual entity suffers material miseries under the modes of material nature. So this is who is the mode of material nature is also represented by Mother Durga. Yeah, so Mother Durga is sitting on a lion with a trident, a trishul. She carries that. And it is said that the trident is the three. Trident is like trishul is got 3 points. And there are threefold miseries. What are the threefold miseries that living entity suffers with?
Adi Daivik, Adi Baudik, and Adhyatmik.
Thank you. So this is a constant Adi Bhautik, Adi Devik, Adi Atmik. Can you expand on that, Mataji? What are
Adi Daivik is caused by demigods, and Adhyatmik is within the body and mind, and Adhyatmik, Adi Daivik, Adi Baudik is caused by the other people,
other living
or insects, or any
insects, or even humans sometimes, or the boss, or whoever. There's always some misery. One of these three types, or one or two, or all of them can exist at the same time. Yeah, so this is the problem that a living entity puts himself into. The trouble, there is this word trouble used a few times in this purport. We will discuss that. So yes, so Sad Asad Yoni Janmashu. So depending on the three modes of goodness, mode of passion, and mode of ignorance. Yes, the living entity is taking different births, different types of births. So the living entity can go in the heavenly planets, yeah, performing all the yajnas. Living entity desiring to enjoy the material energy can go to the heavenly planets. And in the passion, they want to do a lot of activities. They stay in this earthly planets, and by performing abominable activities, they go down to the lower planetary system, the lower birth. So Sad Asad Yoni Janmashu. Karanam Guna Sanghasya, Sad Asad Yoni Janmashu. Karanam Guna Sanghasya, because associating with the three gunas, living entity starts to take different types of birth in different bodies, in different planets, with different lifespan. But eventually, wherever the living entity is in the realm of material nature, is certain to experience the miseries. The demigods are also suffering because of the constant threat from the demons. So nobody is spared. Brahma Bhuna Loka, Punaravartino Arjuna. So when all the way to Brahma Loka down to the lowest Patal Loka, there is misery, or there is this nature of temporary. So Prabhupada gives this formula of what does it say? It says three things. We get out of this material world, get out of the material body, and get out of the misery. These are the three slogans by taking a Krishna consciousness. So the living entity misunderstands himself to be a material product. This means that the present perverted way of thinking, feeling, and willing under material conditions is not natural for him. So this, what is the activity? Which part of which subtle body has this task of thinking, feeling, and willing? It's the mind. Yeah. The mind is the king of the senses. Manasasthanindriyani. So mind, including the five senses, Prakritisthani Karshati, the living entity is struggling under these six senses. The mind is the king of the senses. The mind has the power of thinking, feeling, and willing. So this thinking of the mind in the conditioned state is what? That I am the enjoyer. Yeah, it wants to enjoy. I'm feeling. He wants to feel the enjoyment of the senses. So the feeling, and then the willing is that process which makes him act in the nature of material enjoyment. So this thinking and feeling and willing, which is fully focused towards the self-enjoyment, is the cause of his misery. But so the next sentence clarify, but he has his normal way of thinking, feeling, and willing too. So it's not that the condition means it's not in this natural or normal way, it's abnormal. That's why the living entity is conditioned. But even in the unconditional or the normal way of thinking, Prabhupada explains, there is also thinking, feeling, and willing, because there is this tendency of the Mayavadis to say that there is no thinking, no feeling, no willing. Once you go above Brahman, you just merge, there's nothing. That thinking of nothingness is destroyed here. So what we have is normal way of thinking, feeling, and willing. The living being in his original state is not without thinking, willing, and feeling power. It is also confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita that the actual knowledge of the conditioned soul is now covered by nations. Which verse is that? Any guesses? It is also confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita that the actual knowledge of the conditioned soul is now covered by nations.
Prabhu, does it mean it's covered by the mode of ignorance?
Yes, ignorance is the darkness. Thank you. Tesham eva anukampartham aham ajnana jam tamaha. Ajnana jam, as you said exactly what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. Ajnana jam tamaha, because ignorance is the nations. Yeah. And then this is what is referred here. Thank you so much. Spot on. Thus, the theory that a living being is absolute impersonal is refuted herein. That theory of impersonal Brahman theory, that we have no feeling, no willing, no thinking, is refuted. So thinking, willing, and feeling of a devotee is to always serve Krishna. This cannot be because the living entity has its own way of thinking in his original unconditional state also. The present conditional state is due to the influence of the external energy, which means that the illusory energy takes the initiative while the Supreme Lord is aloof. So the living entity makes a choice. It's free choice. It's again the question of free will. It's the free will of the living entity to choose whether he wants to be influenced by the external energy or he wants to be working with the internal energy of the Lord in service of the Lord. Yeah, that choice is up to the living entity. He's making the wrong choice. The condition state is due to the influence of external energy, which means that the illusory energy takes the initiative while the Supreme Lord is aloof. I mean, once the jiva takes the choice of being under the influence of external energy, is aloof from the Supreme Lord. Yeah. So, as living jiva is called as marginal energy, tatastha. Yeah? So there's internal energy, marginal energy, and external energy. So jiva is the marginal energy which has the choice of either tilting towards the internal or the external. The Lord does not desire that a living being be illusioned by external energy. So that doubt may come in as to, why does the Supreme Lord become aloof? In a way, Supreme Lord never becomes aloof, because even though the jiva wants to enjoy away from Krishna, the Lord Krishna then accompanies the jiva as super soul. Yeah, this is the further point will come later on. The Lord does not desire that a living being be illusioned by external energy, because this challenge may also become, right? If Krishna knows that we will suffer in this material world, why does he give us the free will? If he takes away the free will, then we will not try to enjoy separate from Krishna. It's because of our free will that we are spoiled by choice. If we have no choice, then we'll be happy. Does that make sense? If we have no free will, then we will not fall down because of our desires. We are falling down. So if Krishna takes away the free will, the problem is solved. Any ideas?
No, it won't be solved, Prabhuji, because it will become forcible exchanges or transactions. Only if we have the free will, we can willingly love the Lord and do the devotional service.
Yes, love is very important. Love means free will. So Lord loves us and he wants us to love him. But that's our free will, our choice, whether we want to love him or we don't want to love him. That's the choice given to us. Yeah. But the Lord does not desire. So Lord is not happy that living entity is going away to enjoy in separation from Krishna. And the next sentence is, the external energy is aware of this fact, but still she accepts the thankless task of keeping the forgotten soul under illusion by her bewildering influence. The Lord does not interfere with the task of the illusory energy because such performances of the illusory energy are also necessary for reformation of the conditioned soul. So this being in the prison with the threefold miseries, the trident of Mother Durga, we are being poked by the Adi Bhautik, Adi Devik, Adi Atmik miseries, and that is our reformation. Lato ke bhut, baaton se nahi mante hamari situation. Yeah, so we seem like we probably desire to learn like that. So the Lord does not desire that way, but we desire to be treated that way. This is also a way of reformation, it will be further explained, because this is the example one devotee was giving. Is this is like the parents, father wants the child to do well in his studies, but the child is not interested. He wants to enjoy his play and not getting good grades. So the father hands over to mother. Mother tries to again, teach the child to do better, but the child will not listen to mother again. Condition worsens. Then what happens? You need to call the third party. You need to call a tuition teacher. Some extra additional help is required from outside to deal with the situation. But this is a situation of the material energy, that she has to take that role of, this is a service. Actually, it's a service to the Lord that she's taken up to reform the conditioned soul. An affectionate father does not like his children to be chastised by another agent, yet he puts his disobedient children under the custody of a severe man just to bring them to order. So sometimes this is also required. Sometimes we require a little bit of stricter, severe man, says. Yeah, is that fair or is that unfair? So we are 5,000 down. 5,000 years down the Kali Yuga already, isn't it? All the three yugas are gone. Satyug, Dwapar, Treta is gone. 5,000 years of Kali Yuga is gone. Yeah, Lord has taken many incarnations, and we're still here in the material world. So there must be something about us. But the all-affectionate Almighty Father, at the same time, desires relief for the conditioned soul, relief from clutches of illusory energy. The king puts the disobedient citizen within the walls of the jail, but sometimes the king desires the prisoner's relief, personally goes there and pleads for reformation, and on his doing so, the prisoners are set free. This is the example we see a lot in India. It doesn't happen here so much, but here in India, that someone is given death punishment or life imprisonment or whatever, and the plea goes from the president of the country, then the punishment is reduced, then is set free. So it happens. Prabhupada gives the example of king, who can put the same king puts the citizens behind the walls of the jail, but then the same king also pleads for reformation and get the prisoners free. Similarly, the Supreme Lord descends from his kingdom upon the kingdom of the illusory energy and personally gives relief in the form of Bhagavad Gita, wherein he personally suggests that although the ways of illusory energy are very stiff to overcome, one who surrenders unto the lotus feet of the Lord is set free by the order of the Supreme. Which verse is that? Mama Maya Durkya. Any guesses?
Mamaya Tarantate, I think.
Maya Metam Tarantate. Devi Esha Gunamayi. Devi Esha Gunamayi. Mama Maya Durkya. First sentence is quite strong, isn't it? Mama Maya Duratya. My energy is Duratya. It's very strong. Mamevaya Prapadyante. Then the hope comes. The Lord immediately gives the hope. Because in case it's very scary for us. But there is hope. Yeah, and the example of same, the mind, Manmaya, Mam Upashita. Yeah. That is the other verse which says that the devotees, Manmaya, Mam Upashita. They can put their mind unto me and taking my shelter. Man Mana Bhav Mad Bhakta. This is the man, the mind is the key. Either we use the mind, feeling, willing, and thinking in service to the Lord, or we use the mind in feeling, willing, and thinking for our own enjoyment. That makes the difference. If we do that, if we do the first, which is using the thinking, feeling, and willing capacity in service of the Lord, then we are set free. So Mama Maya Durkya, and then other process that Prabhupada brings in now is the surrendering process. So if we surrender unto the Lord, then we start to dovetail our senses into the service of the Lord. This surrendering process is the remedial measure for getting relief from the bewildering waves of illusory energy. Surrendering process is completed by influence of association. So first we surrender. Adho Shraddha and Sadhu Sangha. So we have developed some faith, it will become later. We develop some faith, and when we associate with devotees, then the process is easier, it's completed. The Lord has suggested, therefore, that by the influence of the speeches of saintly persons who actually realize the Supreme, conditioned souls are engaged in his transcendental loving service. By the words of the saintly person, speeches of saintly persons, Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. When we refer to Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, when we hear from them, we read the scriptures, and we hear from the saintly persons, we take shelter of the spiritual master. Then the influence of all this, what happens is, then we engage in the transcendental service. We need that by ourselves, because in a conditioned state, we cannot get out of the prison ourselves. Is also an example of when we are in the wet sand, we're stuck in there. We need someone else to pull us out from outside. So we can't get outside ourselves. Someone has to be outside to save us. So this is the spiritual master, saintly person who saves us from outside, who can take us out from the wet sand. So when we hear from the saintly persons, we get a taste for hearing about the Lord, and by such hearing only are they gradually elevated to the platform of respect, devotion, and attachment for the Lord. Respect, devotion, and attachment. Shraddha, Bhakti, and Vati, Anukramashyati. The whole thing is completed by the surrendering process. Herein also the same suggestions made by the Lord in his incarnation of Vyasadeva. This means that the conditioned souls are being reclaimed by the Lord both ways, namely by the process of punishment by the external energy of the Lord and by himself as the spiritual master within and without, Within the heart of every living being, the Lord himself as the super soul Paramatma becomes the spiritual master. And from without, he becomes a spiritual master in the shape of scriptures, saints, initiative, spiritual master. Yeah, the same Guru Sadhana Shastra. This is still more explicitly explained in the next sloka. So this sloka is the identification of the problem. Yeah. So first of all, Srila Vyasadeva is meditating on what problem he's trying to solve with Bhagavatam. So he's seeing the Lord, he's seeing the material energy, he's seeing the Jiva, he's seeing how the Jiva is influenced with external energy, and then Jiva is suffering. He's forgotten his true nature. So that's the problem trying to solve. And the next verse that will come, so Prabhupada explains, will mitigate how to solve that problem. Yeah, the first diagnosis, like when we are suffering with a disease, first we have to diagnose directly what the disease is. So once we know the disease, then the medicine can be given. That's quarter to the mind. It's a long purpose. So personal superintendence of the illusionary energies confirmed in the Vedas in relation to the demigods controlling power. Herein also it is clearly stated a living entity is controlled by the external energy in a personal capacity. And the verse we already read the purport. I'm just conscious of time. So he also talks about a few places where Sukadeva Goswami would not have taken the trouble. So the Mayavadis say that there is no difference between the Lord and the living being. The living being just forgotten that he is actually the Lord. Everyone is Narayan. That is refuted by Srila Prabhupada, because if that is true, the Sukadeva Goswami would not have taken the trouble to describe the transcendental pastimes of the Lord. Why would Sukadeva Goswami describe the pastime? Yeah, this is not a trouble for Sukadeva Goswami, but for the argument's sake, to refute the Mayavadis. It's very important actually. So Mayavad is the this is the last snare, the last trace of envy that can come to any time. They can come to anyone. And then Srimad Bhagavatam is the remedy. So that's the remedy that Srila Vyasadeva is presenting, this Bhagavatam, that we are Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Which will free us from the clutches of Maya. So this again the trouble comes here. The Lord, he says that the Lord and the living beings are simultaneously one and different. Another point is distinct herein, that eternal relation between the Lord and the living being is transcendental. Otherwise, Lord would not have taken the trouble to reclaim the conditioned souls from the clutches of Maya. So Lord is taking so much trouble. Yeah, the Lord is accompanying us in the body as super soul. The Lord is has appointed the material energy to reform us. Lord also acts as the Chaitya Guru, as super soul, guiding us when we desire to go back to him. The Lord also sends his personal representatives in the form of spiritual master to again reform us. And the Lord comes himself in the material world to reclaim us. So much trouble in one sense. It's all about the few things comes about trouble. So in one sense, we desire to be separated from the Lord. We desire to enjoy separate from the Lord. Although the Lord allowed us to leave his association, but he's not left us alone. He's not left us aloof. He's taking all the trouble, and his representatives are taking all the trouble to help us get out of this situation. Yes, so Srila Prabhupada took so much trouble to come to the West at the age of 70, going in the ship, cargo ship, and then establishing this Krishna consciousness movement. There's so much trouble. Srila Prabhupada, Vyasadeva, he was despondent, writing all the Vedic scriptures, that will it really solve the problem or not. He's taken the trouble of writing Srimad Bhagavatam for us. The Prabhupada has taken the trouble of translating and providing such beautiful purports, simple for us to understand. Although what is the possibility of understanding what's written in the Sanskrit language? It's impossible. Even if there are some commentaries, it's difficult even understand the commentary also. Srila Prabhupada has made this available for us. The only sleeping 2 hours in the night and putting so much effort in setting up the temple, in writing all these books, translating. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also took sannyas. The devotees were very sad when Mahaprabhu took sannyas. And there's a big pastime of when his hair was cut. He had long, beautiful hair. The devotees were sad, but Mahaprabhu also took sannyas because he says, if I don't take sannyas, these people will not take me seriously. He took that effort. He took that trouble. Yeah. And all the Goswamis, we talked about Raghunath Das Goswami. He was son of a millionaire, and he was also gave up all his, a luxurious life to live like a renunciate. All the 6 Goswamis, and the Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami in the late 90s, he wrote Chaitanya Charitamrita for us. It's a lot of trouble. It's so much trouble for small activity that we do. So how much trouble everyone is taking to help us come out. So we have to be so much grateful. So Prabhupada is what's most wonderful I find is in the same way the living entity. So Prabhupada also talks about trouble for the Lord, trouble for Sudhir Goswami, trouble for the great acharyas, but he says so humbly, he puts it in the same way, living entity is also required to revive his natural love and affection for the Lord. Yeah, so we have to also take some trouble. Yeah, trouble we are taking anyway. So we are troubled by the material energy. We are taking trouble to fulfill our desires for eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Yeah, we have to put so much effort to fulfill these material activities also. The whole life goes in making arrangement for eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Yeah, but if we take some trouble to read the scriptures and follow the process, then the highest perfection of the living entity, which is the aim, the aim to that goal of life, which is prema pumartha mahan, loving the Supreme Lord, can be attained. There was a lot of philosophy in this very nice purport. So I have to stop here. Much of time is 10 to 9. Do you have any questions or comments or discussion points?
Prabhuji,
Yes,
Hare Krishna. I can ask you one question which has been troubling me. We are the product of our past karmas. What we do in this life is what we have already suffered, and we are paying for that. Now with that, and the Mother Durga with his trident guiding us, so what is the connection between the two? I find that hard to understand.
So okay, to give us the fruits of our efforts that we put, all the trouble that we've taken out ourselves, Mother Durga has to manage this material world. So that's how she's managing this. The whole of this material creation is under the control of Mother Durga.
Including our past karmas that we have done as well?
Yes, all the demigods, the responsible for different material energy, and we are suffering because Adi Devik, Adi Bhautik, Adi Atmik, the body is suffering old age, disease, and all the trouble is all under that. So that's this situation we put ourselves into. So because we desire, so how the jiva gets into the contact of the material energy and the 3 modes, it's all our desires eventually. It's not Krishna that who's done this to us. We have done it to ourselves.
Yeah. Okay, Prabhu.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we don't focus so much. The beauty of the Krishna consciousness is these are all negatives, scary. We need to know the Siddhanta, we need to know the principles. But if you're engaged fully, then all these big troubles, ocean-like troubles become like hoof print of a calf, like that. They become so small. So if we just focus on what we do, it's amazing how the suffering may come, but the devotee don't feel it because they're so busy in the service, thinking about Krishna. Prabhupada has given us 16 hours of chanting, reading about Bhagavatam, hearing, going to the temple. There's always festival. There's Damodar Ashtam. There's Kartik month coming up soon, and then we will be again busy. There's always this constant festivals going on. There's some appearance of acharyas. There's always so much going on. If you're busy in that, even if the trouble comes, it just goes away. I mean, it doesn't go away, but we don't really feel it. Comes and goes like that.
Yeah, makes sense. Yes. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Yeah, just concentrate on chanting and you're.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
we don't feel it.
don't pen yet. All right. Okay, Prabhuji.
So material, there's a question here. So material energy is the tuition teacher, yeah, sort of that. And if some souls are in for a strict teaching lessons in one lifetime, how does the Supreme support them in not losing faith? Yeah, the Lord puts so much trouble, faith is ours. Adho Shraddha. Adho Shraddha, that is our requirement is Shraddhavan Jani. There are many songs also, we don't have the time, but it's all about the one currency that we have to carry ourselves is that we have to develop the faith. Once we show a little bit faith, like we start reading Bhagavad Gita, we put our faith, and everything in this scripture is true, and Supreme Lord Krishna is the Supreme Lord, then everything works fine. So we don't lose faith, we keep on going. But to support our faith, God, Krishna will send the spiritual master, will send the devotees, send the scriptures, everything. We just follow the process, then everything carries on without any problem.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. My humble obeisance unto you. And glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you for the wonderful class. The purport was so, so important and so potent. And you explained every sentence so clearly and so nicely. Thank you very much for that. Prabhupada uses a sentence like best use of bad bargain. So our life is it's a bad bargain. So we have to make the best use.
The best use of the bad bargain. Yes, we made a bad bargain, but it's the best use we can make is, yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, yeah. It is a good reminder for us, these verses, come that reminds us that what we can otherwise forget. And all this purification process is what we need, we have to be engaged in our services, our duties, whatever we have duties. So even though sometimes we may not like to do it, but that's all purification for us. We need that purification process. And in that purification process, only we slowly, gradually develop our faith, full faith, and we surrender. Surrendering becomes complete in association with devotees and hearing from the saintly person. We can read this purport many more times, I think. Okay, it's 5:02. So if more questions, we can just close here. Devotees for Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna, thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Hare
Very
Krishna.
nice class.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you,
Hare
Prabhuji.
Hare Bol.
Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
Thank you.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.